Is the New York Times about to break a bombshell news story about a tax-funded UFO crash retrieval program embedded within an aerospace company within the United States of America? And when I say crash retrieval, I'm not referencing the confiscation of a Russian MiG or drone. I'm explicitly referring to a retrieval of either a portion of a craft or a full intact craft that simply does not originate from the hands of man. This rumor has been circulating for a while now, and one of its biggest, if not the biggest proponent of it, is Joe Murgia. Joe Murgia is a pretty level-headed UFO researcher, and he's also a preeminent expert on the Wilson Davis documents, which I will go over a little bit later into this video. But for now, I'd like to share with you Joe Murgia's, for lack of a better word, prophecy regarding the alleged upcoming New York Times bombshell article.
So what does disclosure mean to me? Honestly, it's going to be messy. And I think it's coming possibly next week. If my source is correct and the New York Times is going to be putting out their article about crash retrievals and related subjects, maybe Wilson Davis documents. And if that happens, and that article is good as I've been hearing, if it's as good as I've been hearing, it's going to create major waves, and it'll be the first step in disclosure. And we'll see next week with the New York Times article. I'm pretty sure it's next week. It could change, but I have one really solid source that says next week. And once that happens, it's going to open up Pandora's box, and you're going to see this topic everywhere, and people will follow up from other media outlets. And it's exciting to see, but I'm a little worried to see how the world handles it. I mean, Kim Kardashian has 59 million followers, and people are really interested in that kind of stuff. This is on a whole another universe, a different level. So, very interesting times we live in.
Before we go any further, I just want to say that right now in my YouTube career, I'm uploading a lot more frequently. So if you were ever considering becoming a patron or even becoming a member of my YouTube channel, join now buttons below. Now would probably be a good time. That said, let's continue. Beyond 6 insider sources that Joe Murgia has that have told him that there will be a New York Times bombshell article on UFO crash retrievals, we actually know with certainty that journalists are pursuing this story. And we know that because Pulitzer Prize winner Ralph Blumenthal had a conversation on the phone with Michael Hall, and this conversation was broadcast live. And Joe Murgia happened to be listening to it live, and he live tweeted it. It wasn't really supposed to be broadcast live according to Ralph Blumenthal, so it was a kind of a mess, but that's how we know. So in my view, the question is not, are journalists pursuing this story? The question is, will this story get past the editors of the New York Times? And I'll also add that Leslie Kean is also involved in pursuing this story. Ralph Blumenthal and Michael Hall did discuss the Wilson Davis documents, but before I go into those documents, it's important for you to know that on April of 1997, a really important meeting took place between Dr. Stephen Greer, sixth man on the moon, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, Lieutenant Commander Willard Miller, Admiral Thomas Wilson, General Patrick Hughes, and Admiral Michael Crawford. And they convened to talk about a private organization that was studying alien technology and alien bodies. And the purpose of the meeting was to alert government officials that this private organization should be brought under the control and oversight of the U.S. government. So after Admiral Thomas Wilson was essentially briefed on this private program, he went and pursued it. Ultimately, he did discover it. He flew out to the place that it's housed. He went to a secure vault. He spoke with the program director, security director, and the corporate lawyer. And they explained to him that he doesn't have a need to know regarding the program. But they were willing to tell him ultimately what the program did. And they explained to him that the program was a back engineering program of an intact craft not made by the hands of man. Admiral Wilson got really angry because he was denied access because, quote unquote, he didn't have a need to know. And he was also angry that he felt that this program did not have proper governmental oversight. Years later, in 2002, by that time he was a civilian, but he just retired as the director of the DIA. He had a meeting with a scientist named Eric Davis in a car behind the EG&G building in Las Vegas. And during this meeting, Thomas Wilson basically explained to Eric Davis his experience going out to the unacknowledged special access program, getting denied access, and all the details that went along with that. And that meeting between Thomas Wilson and Eric Davis was recorded. And that is why it's called the Wilson-Davis Memo. Here's a 2008 Larry King Live show in which Dr. Edgar Mitchell actually talks about the meeting I spoke of earlier in 1997 and Admiral Thomas Wilson going out to the Special Access Program and talking with the representatives.
Well, I eventually went to the Pentagon and asked for a meeting with the Intelligence Committee of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, which I got with another naval officer who had had many similar experiences. And we told our story, and this gentleman, a vice admiral, said to us, well, I don't know about that, but I'm going to find out. And called a few weeks later and said he had found the source of the black budget funding for this project, and that he was going to subsequently investigate, because if it was real, he should know about it. As a matter of fact, he should be in charge. That was his words. And so we did get calls from him sometime later, and a report much later than that he had found the people responsible for the cover-up and for the people who were in the know, and were told, I'm sorry, Admiral, you do not have need to know here, and so goodbye.
Joe Murgia in his 6 sources is not the only source I've come across predicting that a New York Times bombshell article on UFO crash retrievals is soon going to get published. And if you recall, on June 18th, Donald Trump Jr., the son of President Trump, asked Donald Trump in a live interview whether he'll open the files on Roswell. And many have speculated that the reason this took place is because the Trump administration already knew about the inevitable bombshell New York Times article that's going to get released. And if you really want to get conspiratorial, you could say that this article has been sanctioned and it's coming out to put the disclosure process in overdrive. Here's a Uri Geller Facebook post. He writes, "Hi to all my dear friends. Here I introduce you to 3 aliens. Now that reference is a joke. There are some pictures of children underneath this passage," but he continues, "I'm a huge believer in it. Very soon, the New York Times will be publishing an amazing story about government involvement in UFO research. And remember this, be resolute. Your resolve will carry the strategy to victory." And here's Nick Pope's July 14th tweet. Which will hit first? A New York Times article on crash retrievals and the Wilson-Davis notes, or the DoD's next statement on ATIP currently being revised as a result of my question on the Drake equation and the evidence presented by Lieutenant Tim McMillan in his Popular Mechanics article? Here is prominent member of To the Stars Academy's blog, Chris Mellon. And he linked to an article with this excerpt. I'll read it for you. Yes, we have UFO crash wreckage, with the New York Times chasing crash saucers and Trump talking on the record. Roswell remains the original sin of the UFO cover-up. Now, granted, this is not Mellon speaking from his own mind. It's only an excerpt from the article, but many have found it significant that he linked to this article at all on June 29th. Some have suggested that this is a hint that he knows what's coming regarding the predicted bombshell New York Times article. Now, I have my own anonymous source. He told me that people that are knowledgeable about UFOs have been reached out to by New York Times journalists. He also told me that the New York Times is looking into material analysis of exotic materials allegedly not originating from the hands of man. So what do I make of all this? Well, I was skeptical that the New York Times was actually in the process and almost certainly going to publish an article on UFO crash retrievals. It's just so over the top. But after talking to my anonymous source, I'm no longer as skeptical as I was, and I actually anticipate this is going to happen. And I think that an article of this nature could have a profound impact on the disclosure process, and I'll tell you why. The way I see it, the reason that the Congress, the United States Congress, the presidents, at least allegedly, and much of the military brass were not informed about UFO reality, and that's not some conjecture. We know that the Secretary of Defense, James Mattis, was not informed about ATIP, according to Luis Elizondo, and I can't prove that that occurred, but Chris Mellon said the same thing, and I believe that that is true. So why were all of these people within our own government that should have been informed about UFO reality not? And I think it's very obvious. They were not informed about it because a decision was made long ago to keep this reality classified. Why? Well, I've done a whole video on why I think there's a UFO cover-up. I'll put that link in the description if you want to get my whole opinion on that. But at the end of the day, it's just speculation. So whether it was a result of national security or officials were concerned how such a revelation would impact human society, the bottom line is they classified it, baby. You better believe they classified it. And they did it in an extreme way to the point of keeping military brass in the United States Congress out of the loop. So I think it's pretty clear they did this because they recognized, the architects of the secrecy recognized that there is no way in the universe that you could maintain secrecy on something of this enormous weight unless you just didn't tell anybody. So they kept those in the know to an extremely small amount, to the extent of brushing off the United States Congress and most of the military brass and the intelligence community. And so I think this upcoming New York Times article may make the cover-up that has been ensuing for a long time no longer nearly as practical. The house of cards is going to fall. We already know that the United States Congress has issued a bill, hasn't gotten passed yet, so that they can receive more data, or any data for that matter, on UFO reality. And they're even asking for some of it to be unclassified so that American citizens can get a look at it. The house of cards has fallen, baby. It's already in the works. And the New York Times article that may come out, I think it will, I think is going to challenge this secrecy even further. So we are fast approaching a post-disclosure world, in my opinion. Here's a tweet made today by Joe Murgia. I can't vouch for its accuracy, but I do believe that Joe has good sources. It will go public. I'm confident the Senate Intelligence Committee knows all about crash retrievals. What were they told? Don't know. But full UAP videos will be released. They are playing catch up at this point. There are 7 words that I want to leave you with from this video. The house of cards will fall, baby.
Very interesting times we live in.
Please do not forget to subscribe. And if you'd like to support this channel, you can check out my merch shop where I sell t-shirts. Links in the description below, or you could even become a patron or get a YouTube membership with my channel. Join now button below. Thank you so much for watching, and look forward to seeing you in a post-disclosure world.